Good morning, Fargo. Tony Gehrig, Fargo City Commissioner, giving you your update for the December 5th Fargo City Commission meeting. There are three issues on the agenda for this recap. One would be the black building exemption that we passed. Two would be the discussion on the Dakota Access Pipeline that we had here in Fargo. And three would be the finance agreement with Cass County Electric. So we'll start with the black building in downtown Fargo. The black building is being remodeled by Kilbourne Group. Earlier this year in January, they asked for a 10-year pilot exemption, which means payment in lieu of taxes. They just don't pay taxes, or a certain amount of taxes, I should say, for 10 years. The first 5 of that would be 100% exemption, and the last 5 of that would be a 50% exemption. Hundreds of thousands of dollars given for that exemption. At the meeting on December 5th, the other commissioners voted to approve a Renaissance zone exemption on top of that already given exemption. So now we're exempting the black building in downtown Fargo for 15 years, where they'll either pay no or some taxes. There are a few things to speak about to this. Number one, we just had a small business Saturday recently here in the city of Fargo. It's important to note that every single time that we give an exemption to one of these larger companies here in the city of Fargo, or a national company like FedEx, that we are harming small businesses. Small businesses make up the majority of the employment here in our city, like it does across the country. Every time we take taxes away from one of those companies, we give it to a small business or a homeowner or people like that. If you're paying taxes, you're basically paying to pay for their property taxes when they're exempt. That's a bad thing, and that goes against being supportive of small businesses here in our community. So I have argued that it is impossible to be pro-incentives and pro-small business, because they harm small businesses when you give them away. The black building wasn't eligible for a pilot, and that is well known. If you go back to the minutes at our last meeting, I have emails stating that the black building was not eligible because it is an office building and a retail location. We do not give pilots for offices and retail. Now, the other commissioners are trying to, some of the other commissioners are trying to change that policy to make it legal, but currently it's not, and it shouldn't be. That's not what the goal of these pilots are or should be. So we passed it. It was known at the time. It was discussed at the meeting that this was not part of our policy, but it was passed anyway, 4-1. So they shouldn't have received a pilot, and therefore, in my opinion, they should not have received the Renaissance zone exemption. This project, especially given the fact it has a pilot on it, was going to happen anyway. They do not need the exemption in order to do what they're doing. And if you don't need the incentive to do something, then it's no longer an incentive. It's simply a taxpayer giveaway. We are giving our money to a company who can certainly afford it and certainly would do whatever they were doing without the incentive. So 3 reasons why I voted no. This was a 4-1 vote. And like all the other exemptions, folks, unless you start paying attention and unless you start speaking up, these are going to continue and continue until maybe the state makes them stop. But we don't know if that's going to happen or not. The second thing on the agenda was the finance, or excuse me, I keep saying finance, but it's the franchise agreement for Cass County Electric. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but every so often we update our agreements with our utility companies here in Fargo, so XL, Cass County Electric, etc. And the biggest thing with this in the franchise agreement is the franchise fee that we charge. Basically, the city of Fargo picks a percent. It could be any percent. It could be 0. It could be 100%. And we charge that company to operate within our city. Now, the companies have said publicly and acknowledged publicly that anything we charge them will be passed straight through to the taxpayer. This is simply a tax on the taxpayer. So like any other tax, the business doesn't necessarily pay it. They just say on your electricity bill, if you have a $100 bill and we charge them a 2% franchise fee, your bill is now $102. If we charge 100%, it'll be $200. So the idea was kicked around of raising it to say 5 or 6% because the city of Fargo makes money doing that because it's a tax. I fought against that, and I said that I would not support raising the franchise fee. So right now it's 2%, and that's where it stayed. I would also, and maybe would have supported, making the franchise fee 0 for homeowners and maybe moving it up to 3% for businesses. The reason for that is because places like Sanford Health and other so-called charities don't pay property taxes. So this would be a way for them to get more skin in the game and actually pay for some of the things that they use. That's not what happened, and I'm happy to say that our franchise fee was not increased, and therefore taxes were not increased on you, the taxpayer. So I'm here again fighting to keep your taxes low and sustainable, and in this case, it worked. We did not raise taxes on people through this franchise fee that pretty much no one knows about, quite frankly. Okay, the last thing is the Dakota Access Pipeline, and some people were very upset that I brought this on the agenda. So why did I bring it up on the agenda? One, we have offered support to Morton and Burleigh County for months now, as long as this has been going on. On and off, we have had officers out there. As many as 49 of our city officers have been out there to help with the protests. That is acceptable to me. We have a mutual aid agreement with these other counties and saying, if you need help, we'll help you. And for example, for the flood, if we need help here in Fargo, they come and help us, and they have over the years plenty of times. Even consider the Officer Mosier incident, where other counties and other organizations came and helped the city of Fargo when we had to deal with that big problem. So that's why we're out there, is because we have a mutual aid agreement. The reason I want to talk about it is we should know what this costs the city of Fargo. We should know if we have enough officers on the street, right? When we give 45 or 50 officers or whatever it is to a different county, do we have enough here in Fargo to meet the obligations of you, the taxpayer, who expect police support at a certain level? So I wanted to get those answers. I want to know how we're going to get paid back. Right now, we've been told the state will pay us back, and they have paid some of it back. And with this discussion, we were reassured that the state will accelerate that repayment program back to us. So this was not an anti-cop or a pro-protest, or not, it wasn't even an anti-protest discussion. This was a discussion about how this DAPL protest is affecting you in the city of Fargo directly. This is a public issue, a large public issue, and it needs to be discussed in a public forum. We should not be afraid to talk about this. Neither you as a taxpayer or me as a city commissioner should be afraid to bring these issues forward. And if we are afraid, then we're giving all that power to the protest. So this was simply an education for me and to the community. I want to know how we're going to get repaid. I want to know that we had ample police support here in the city of Fargo. And I want everyone to realize why we initially went out there and helped Morton County with this protest. And I think they're all justifiable. They're all justifiable reasons, and that's what I wanted to convey to the people of Fargo. We're not doing anything underhanded. We're not doing anything that you wouldn't do as a commissioner, and I wanted people of Fargo to understand that. So some people didn't like that I had it on the agenda. Some people didn't like what John or I said, and that's just fine. That's how democracy works. We are elected to be the leaders. We're elected to have the opinions and to make the decisions. And I think we did, and we hadn't talked about it yet as a city commission. And that's important. We hadn't talked about it. And now we have, and now people should understand where we're coming from. So that's your update for the December 5th Fargo City Commission meeting. Please feel free to share this video. And as always, keep watching how your Fargo City Commissioners are spending your money.